Yeah, so see the crisis in the church is rampant, and if much of why the cover-ups happen is because of so there are quite many problems within the hierarchy of the church itself. Hierarchy of the church has been the part of the tradition of the church, and it has been um, you know it has been the way church was founded, right? You have bishops, and then under bishops you have certain priests, and who are helping the bishops. Your bishop is guiding the flock, etc. uh, uh, you when you have that kind of a hierarchy, and further when you have a let's say a kind of congregations, etc., in which you have congregation of sisters, and order of priests, etc., you have further complications within them. You cannot just, until and unless the congregation is very very lukewarm, and order is very lukewarm, and liberal, and gives a lot of freedom, etc., you tightly have to obey the rules of the order and congregation, etc. If you look at the case in a simple scenario in which a nun and a bishop, a nun versus a bishop, let's say if a bishop accuses, if a nun accuses of a sexual assault on bishop, or rape of a bishop, you see, if she approaches, there is nobody. First of all, there is, and this is happened with many churches, even after so many issues worldwide, the church worldwide doesn't even have a proper way of saying that how to solve this within the church. First of all, my first thing is that it should not be solved within the church, because church doesn't have any kind of punishment. It's not, we are not back there in Middle Ages where church has some governing authority or something like that. Even then, there were secular authorities for punishing crimes like this. So definitely secular authorities are to be fostered, but even then, you there is a structure that is there. See, first of all, if you look at this nun who went to a priest said that he cannot go far with this because he is facing a bishop. And technically the thing is this, that nobody at least in India, that's the case, that nobody knows what to do when this situation arises, because first of all, a nun is not having that. I mean, a layman like a person who is living out there with a family, etc., who has a private property and who has all those things. He has at least means to, he knows what is going in the world, and he knows how to approach, how to file an FIR, or how to do this, how to fight cases, and who to contact with, etc. A nun, especially monastic nuns who are living in monasteries, they don't know about all these things, right? They, hardly they would even meet a lawyer in their lifetime. That's one thing. So clearly, none would always go to some of the clerical, authorities, and then clerical authorities have limited power when compared with an authority like bishop. And they too obviously don't know where to start and where to end, and what to do, what should be the next move, etc. So first of all, there is a clear lack of understanding of what exactly needs to be done when there is an issue like this. Especially if we go within the church, it's within the church. Even if we go outside the church, let's say if we file the complaint, etc. Many times, as it recently happened that the bishop was accused of using power and politics, and the money for for defending the for defending his case, and he FIR wasn't filed, charge sheet wasn't filed, and so on and so forth. Charges were not framed against the bishop, and the proceedings were delayed a lot. So clearly, and this nun has limited power, and she of course needs to be hidden, in the sense that she needs to her identity needs to be hidden, and there is lot more at stake here. Now, when we talk about the so if they go to the priest says that you go to bishop, and then you go to some other bishop, and they say that the bishop there and the bishop here, like in the southern part of India or in the northern part of India of a particular diocese, of two different dioceses, they are both equals. And then you have to go to, Rome, you have to go to Vatican. So look at the hierarchy, that if a bishop accuses if a bishop is accused, if a nun accuses a bishop for rape, she has to indirectly go to Vatican or a authority higher than the bishop, maybe cardinal or Vatican, or somebody like them. They definitely have to go to approach Rome for an issue like this, if they have to go within the church. Now, clearly, if you ask to an outsider who is not a part of the church, he says that no need to go within the church, you just file the complaint. Well, again, there are a lot many impediments when you file a complaint. That this nun, she is living in a congregation, so she clearly, and she has to obey the rules of the congregation, by the way. And even in the, let's say, in the case of nuns, and in the case of priests who are the co-priest of this of the person who was assaulted, let's say. So the priests, nuns, etc., they live in a kind of an order in which there is this within the regional level, there is a provincial, there is a superior, and then there is a superior at a higher level, and then there is a superior who is around the world, there is one general superior, right? And in many cases, if the congregations are quite small, then there is only one superior within the regional level, and there is a superior for the entire world. But it is not that widespread congregation, so it hardly is 3-4 missions on 3-4 superiors, and then that's it, and then the major superior. So if, and this is highly, what to say, autocratic regime, so to speak. I mean, of course, it's not about day-to-day politics anyway. It's about, nuns are there for to to live a prayer and monastic life, or to do social service, and so on and so forth. So they have to clearly obey the command of superiors. And unfortunately, there isn't any dissent that can take place, a rightful dissent or righteous dissent. So for example, if those two superiors, let's say, are wicked, the entire congregation has to obey the words in toto of those, if they try to cover up this issue, if the superiors try to cover up this issue, and if the superiors try to make sure that this nun, or this bishop, let's say, his identity is not revealed, or his identity, like, he should go scot free, if they are determined to do so, then or let's say, they are, for various reasons, they just say that, okay, this nun should be, she shouldn't be listened, and this bishop is more important for us than a nun. And then what happens is that these nuns would have to, and every other nun in the congregation would have to obey the orders of the superior. And so if, let's say, superior says that you don't even talk to that nun, that nobody dares to talk to that nun, because it's like this: you are part of a congregation, and you could be removed from the congregation based on things like owning some private vehicles or something like that, or disobeying the laws of the superior. You would be thrown out of the congregation. Once you are thrown out of the congregation, you have to join with some other congregation. The other congregation won't accept you, because in your record it has been seen that you don't obey the superiors, right? So they would be seeing that, okay, this nun would do her own thing every time, and they wouldn't obey superiors or whatever it is. Then she wouldn't, that's a case. And so life is at stake, and of course these people don't, for everything they have to depend on the congregation. For food they have to depend on the congregation. For clothes they have to depend on the congregation, the clerical clothes. For vehicle they have to depend on the congregation. Only for things like comb or something like that, comb or soap and so on, bathing soap, etc. They might have their personal pocket money expenses that they could use as per their will. Rest everything is the rent wherever they stay, that staying place is named after the congregation. The food they eat, the congregation gives them the food. So everything they are fully submitted and they are dependent on the congregation. So it's very difficult for them, even though they in their heart think that this is wrong. For the sake of survival, they would not they would not enter into this kind of stuff, and they won't stand for judgment, they won't stand for what is right. And of course they could be thrown out of the congregations. And in many cases their families might be poor and they don't have any financial resources. They might not be having financial resources to sustain the priest, to sustain the nun, and fight the case, fight the court cases, etc. So all these things are there. And then what, think about the life afterwards. This nun would then not be going to any congregation, and she let's say if she's 30 or 40, she once was a nun and she now has to be married off, or the kind of life ahead is very problematic if they don't follow the rules of the congregation. And if the superiors of the congregation, you happen to be someone who is let's say, who is licking the feet of the bishop, and wants to support the bishop in this wrongful cause, then that is the case. And then there is also a case where if bishop, let's say, is accused of a particular crime, then you have to look at this factor that many times it depends upon the persona of the bishop. Because bishop sometimes is even, like, for example, for many politicians, if a politician is accused of some particular crime, if the politician has fan following, sometimes it happens that he doesn't even lose any fan following, right? People give a heroic welcome to that particular politician even after going to the courts and being, let's say, coming in after bail, etc. So clearly there is a heroic hero worship, so to speak, or heroic imagery that is to be seen in this that is to be seen in the people itself. So in many times it might happen that the people are not supporting the family. So for example, if the bishop is a local bishop, and now in this scenario of in many cases it happened that the bishop was of somewhere else, was bishop of some other diocese, and this the family from which this nun belonged to was living in another diocese. Now let's say if they are living in the same diocese, then it's they have an added burden of what the society will think of them. Society would many times be favoring the bishop. It might favor bishop, although that actually happens rarely, because in the eyes of the layman, whenever a person is accused of a crime, he is automatically in the minds of the layman, he is adjourned as a guilty. So he is adjudicated as a guilty. So clearly that is also a case. And then there is people who think that maybe, and this is also a probability, that bishop might be innocent and he is accused of being guilty wrongfully. So that is also the case. So clearly there is a structural change that needs to be required, and a structural change not in the congregation, because these things are not everyday events, but then there should be some organizations. For example, in my opinion, there should be an organization comprised of lay Catholics mainly, and only few clergy who would approaches who could be approached in every place, in every Catholic church. There would be many people who are clergy, who are who are in important offices, who are presiding important offices in the or let's say ex officers of government in the country. So let's say if retired government officials of different countries, and then other faithful Catholics could be presided in this, and very few clergy. And then when this matter comes up, they need to handle this case in the best possible manner. They need to make sure that there is protection of people who are not who should not be murdered, because we see even these cases that a person is gets murdered because he happens to be a witness of that particular incident. So all these issues need to be taken care of, because they are living under the church, and it's the church's responsibility to provide them that kind of protection. So an entire organization needs to be deployed at that particular issue and at a particular incident. They need to be given, just like in my opinion, they shouldn't be living in congregation, and they shouldn't be living in like when this, let's say, if a nun is accused of a nun accuses somebody of rape, or when somebody else accuses of rape, if especially within the clergy, if this is matter, then they shouldn't be living with the rest of the congregation. They should be given special protection by the church, and they should be living somewhere else. And the church should make sure that there is a proper defense and proper adjournment that happens in the church with regard to this. And clearly we need to do an entire it's and we need to take the help of legal jurists as well on deciding this issue. It's always better that the church itself presents the guilty before the court, and then the court decides whether this person is guilty or not, rather than court finding out within the church who is guilty. So if there is, it's always better like that. And of course, if church thinks that the person is not guilty, still she has an option to approach the court to find that the person is guilty or not. But definitely there is a structural requirement within the church. There should be a different structure that needs to be created. And one of the things that we should also consider is that who would pay the finances of defending the if a bishop wants to defend his case, what kind of whether from where will these lawyers be paid money, from whose pocket will the lawyers be paid money? Bishop again is the person who has the authority of the church, but he usually uses the money of the church, right? So should the money of the church be used to give to the lawyers for defending a bishop's own case? It's not, he's not defending the church, he's not defending for a particular cause within the church, or it's not a religious issue, it's a criminal issue that he himself faces. So should that particular money be used in that manner, and so on and so forth. So clearly we need to have an entire structural change. We need to create bodies and boards within the church for overviewing this thing, where people could come and complain without hesitation, without fear of being known, and the decisions could be placed accordingly in a systematic manner. These let's say any person, even if a lay person comes to the board, approaches this board, and this board then says to the in every diocese this board should be present. One member of this board should be present, and then the board should be overall within the country, comprised of faithful Catholics, and especially who have power within the government, or let's say who have experience of handling these legal issues and legal social issues, etc. So such a body should be definitely comprised of as soon as possible within the church.